The way that I look at it is burlesque can be, super feminist and empowering, and I do it because I want to share my art with an audience. Hi, my name's Polly Anther. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm a burlesque artist, pole dancer, and online sex worker. And today I'm going to be answering your questions. So how and when did you start dancing? When did you first start pole dancing? So I began dancing when I was 2 years old. My mum chucked me in a ballet class, as a lot of mums do, and I just fell in love with it from then. I went to ballet, tap, contemporary, modern dance. I went to basically every class that I was allowed to go to. My dad was also a breakdance teacher, so I also breakdanced for quite a few years, which shocks a lot of people. And I always really admired watching pole dancers on, whether that be a movie or something I'd seen on TV from as young as I can remember, and thought it was really cool. When I went to university at 20 years old, I started pole dance then, so that was around 7 years ago. What is your favourite act to perform? My favourite act is called Bed of Nails. It was inspired by Alice Cooper's song called Bed of Nails. The moment I heard it, I knew that I had to do an act to it. So I had seen people do a Bed of Nails circus act before, and I'd also seen people incorporate it into burlesque, but I'd never done it myself. So I heard the song and decided that I was just going to do it. I didn't know at the time that there were classes where you could learn that kind of thing. So if you're listening to this and you want to try Bed of Nails, please just go to a class and do it safely. But I went to B&Q and got all of the materials, and I made myself a bed of nails and a costume within a week. And to this day, because I made absolutely everything from scratch, it's still one of my most favourite acts to perform. So yeah, that gets requested a lot. Is burlesque dancing sex work? I don't think this is super simple to answer, but in my opinion, it isn't. There are some crossovers. Some burlesque dancers are sex workers as well, and some might call themselves sex workers because of the nature of the dancing. Burlesque to me is more of a performance art these days. It's done for different reasons to sex work. The definition of sex work is work that sexually gratifies somebody else. So it is done purely for sexual gratification, whereas burlesque is more of a performance art, and it's kind of incorporated with theatre and comedy and things like that. The origins of burlesque is sex work and stripping. So burlesque artists have a lot to owe, everything to owe to strippers and sex workers, and we should continue to uplift and support them wherever we can because we owe our profession to them. What is the difference between burlesque and modern day stripping? So burlesque kind of came from stripping and sex work. As previously mentioned, it's more of a performance art now, and it's kind of the art of the striptease, which is done in more of like a cabaret show setting. But stripping usually exists in strip clubs and is also striptease. However, it will also include things like table dances and lap dances to the clients. They have similarities in the way that, striptease art is still the same, but burlesque is more, it can be feminist, it can be comedic, it can be theatrical, any of those things, whereas striptease in strip clubs is usually just a dance. That's not to say that it can't be beautiful or artistic or powerful for those people, but it is just a different kind of audience, I would say. Would you recommend learning the history of burlesque before starting to perform? I would 100% recommend that you learn your history before beginning burlesque. It's a super rich history that goes back way, way back. Again, beginning with sex workers and strippers. It's very glamorized these days, and because of the glamorous image that you usually see associated with burlesque artists, but it wasn't all that great, so I would definitely recommend reading that. I actually didn't read the full history of it before I started burlesque. I was super starry-eyed at 18 years old and thought, oh wow, I'm going to do this really glamorous, really cool dance form. And then only when I started looking deeper into it, I really understood the rich history and the relation to sex workers and stripping. Should sex work be accepted in society? I'll start this off by saying sex work is work. and always will be, always has been. It's probably the oldest profession, like ever. People have been buying and selling sex forever, and it's still somehow got this stigma attached to it in society. Most people have sex. Most people consume porn. Most people buy sex toys. You know, it's such a huge thing, yet we can't accept as a society that it is normal, and that there is a demand for sexual services. Otherwise, you know, sex work wouldn't exist. These people are just going to a job like anybody else, earning their money to pay their bills. So there shouldn't be any stigma around that. The bottom line is, the act of selling sex itself is not harming anybody. The only harm, because I'm sure there are people that will say, oh, well, the women are being harmed, there's psychological damage, there's, you know, abuse that come from the male clientele, or, you know, the clientele. The only reason that is because it's not been decriminalised. It's not safe, basically. That's the only problem with it. It's not with sex work itself, it's the laws surrounding sex work that bring that harm upon people. What are your views on strip clubs? Are they exploitative? As a whole, I don't think strip clubs are exploitative. They are a place of work, just like an office might be to you or me, except probably with better music and better outfits. I know a lot of people, you know, think that it's exploiting women and catering to the male gaze, etc. But really, these are consenting adults that are choosing to go to work in these places. You know, it's almost a place of empowerment rather than exploitation. They're using their sexuality and, you know, their looks and their bodies to make money. And I think that's quite empowering, although some people may not. I will say one way in which they could be potentially exploitative is the practices that are in place in some strip clubs. The rules aren't always in favour of the dancers, usually quite the opposite actually. The club is trying to make money, so they sometimes take a larger cut from the dancers. As a whole, I think they're quite empowering, and I don't think they're exploitative. How are you so comfortable with sex work being a part of your identity when so many other sex workers feel like they need to hide it? I'm very aware that I am in a super privileged position here. I am a white, able-bodied, average body type woman, so I do not face a lot of the things that other sex workers do. I also only do part-time, what you would consider sex work, my online sex work. There's not as much stigma around what I do as there might be for somebody else. I also have a super supportive friends and family network. They all know everything about what I do, and they're very supportive, whereas unfortunately not everybody has this. Also because I don't do full service sex work, which is, you know, in-person sex work, I'm not at any kind of immediate danger. So I'm quite comfortable with my identity as a sex worker because I'm not in immediate danger, which is unfortunately the situation that a lot of people are in. As much as sex work can be empowering and great and pays the bills and is wonderful for some people, it can be dangerous. So in regards to people feeling like they need to hide it, it's more of a necessity. Stage names, etc., are not just there to be something fancy and to sound really cool, they're also there for safety. Not everybody has a super supportive friends and family network, and unfortunately, you know, letting people know that they do sex work can be isolating. Is it possible to dismantle the dominance of the male gaze while still appearing to cater to it? This question really made me think, and it's really hard to answer. I don't actually know if it's possible. We've all grown up in this society where we all have internalized male gaze, so it's really hard to tell what is your true vision and, you know, what is the male gaze kind of thing that you've been brought up with. Burlesque can be, you know, super feminist and empowering, and I do it because I want to share my art with an audience. So I'm motivated by music, by art, by fashion. I've always made lingerie and costumes, so I'm motivated by my own design. And I just really love sharing that with everybody, and it does feel empowering to me when I'm on the stage. You must get a lot of attention from creepy men. How do you deal with that online and in real life? I would say it's not just creepy men, it's creepy people in general, because I have had creepy experiences with different genders. I think online it's way easier to deal with, although, you know, if you get a lot of hate, that's quite hard to deal with. I only get a bit here and there, so I just utilise that block button and it's kind of over and done with. And also taking like regular breaks from social media and stuff really helps with that kind of thing if it's really getting to you. But I would say in real life, I have to deal with creepy people pretty much every day. And I don't think that's got anything to do with what I do, what I look like. I think it simply comes down to my gender. And even then, you know, it's not just women, it's people of all genders, especially marginalised groups, that have to deal with creepy men or creepy people. So in real life, I would say that I'm not really that great at dealing with it. There's not much more you can do about it other than if it's safe to, you can, you know, set some boundaries or, I don't know, remove yourself from the situation. But other than that, it's quite hard to say what a good way to deal with it is. How are you affected by social stigmas around being a pole dancer, a burlesque performer and a sex worker? Again, I do not face as much stigma as other people might, especially Black, people of colour, marginalised groups, LGBTQ+ people. So I'm still in a kind of privileged position and I recognise that. But I think the biggest thing for me, stigma-wise, that affects me is actually online censorship. Online censorship can really affect people's bookings, which affects their livelihoods. For me, I'm not a survival sex worker, and basically that means that it's their main job to survive, to pay bills. But for survival sex workers, online censorship is super annoying and worrying because that's how they make their money, that's how they advertise. People's accounts are getting deleted for nothing these days. I mean, I've had so many warnings and I adhere to all Instagram's rules and they're still threatening to delete me. So although it's not stigma by, you know, an individual per se, it's the whole stigma around sex. So in addition to online censorship and stigma, there's also the threat of real life stigma. One of the examples of this, which it actually affects people's livelihoods, is governments and councils trying to shut down the strip clubs in the UK. So there's a lot of that going on right now. It's been happening in Bristol, it's been happening in Blackpool, and basically the council are just trying to say that the strip clubs are unsafe, so they're losing a lot of people their jobs and their livelihoods. If we can eradicate or at least make this stigma less damaging, it will be less damaging to sex workers in the long run. Has your line of work ever affected your relationships? It has affected my relationships, more than one of them as well. It mainly comes from a place of insecurity on the other person's part. What I've found is that that person becomes jealous of other people seeing my body, whether that be in a sexual way or not. And with the online sex work thing, people seeing pictures of me or having maybe a couple of messages back and forth, it comes down to jealousy, unfortunately. I have always been a strong-willed person and I've always stuck to my guns, so my careers and hobbies have outlived those relationships. What do you think needs to happen in the UK for sex workers to be more respected? Just breaking down that stigma of sex in general will be a huge thing for sex workers. It's already kind of happening with people reading a lot more online with the sex positive movement. I feel like it's really blown up online the last couple of years. And so if we continue to educate ourselves and have conversations with people around us, it will gradually start breaking down that stigma. One thing that the UK can do as a whole to help sex workers is to decriminalise sex work, not legalise. This will just make it safer for sex workers in general. There's a lot about this online and there are a lot of protests happening. So if people got involved in those, that would be great. Thank you so much for all your questions. If you want to find me on Instagram, my username is @PollyAnther. Also, if you want to find out more about sex work, strippers, etc., I would recommend looking at some Instagram resources. And once you find one, you'll find loads more. But two that I often look at are Swarm Hive and also the United Sex Workers page on Instagram.